The mailman doesn't deliver on a Sunday.
If you don't like that, you don't like NBA basketball.
Anthony for three. Bang! J.R. Smith! We just saw men fly. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Cleveland! This is for you!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I am Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. Thank you so much for listening and making Coast to Coast your first listen for NBA podcasts. Remember, if you're on YouTube, give us a follow. Lay us out a comment. Let us know what you're thinking. You're on Spotify. Leave us that review and follow us. We'll keep producing that content. You make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about the San Antonio Spurs, a team that's kind of been forgotten about, but let's not forget, they drafted Victor Wembanyama. It's all been kind of lost with all the big trade news that's been going down, but they've committed to a first piece in the building around of Victor Wembanyama and Devin Vassell, so we're going to be getting into that in a bit on the Spurs as a whole as they go into their first season of their bright future, hopefully for them. Then we'll be taking a look at the depth chart for the three super teams that have been built in the Suns, Celtics, and Bucks. They've obviously had to give up pieces to acquire some greater stars. We'll see what they're like in terms of depth, and then we'll finish off with a little top 5 list. But before we get into it, Chris, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm good. I'm very excited to be. It was good until I'm choking on my coffee here. I'm great. I just made a pumpkin spice latte. Is my second of the day. Just rolling through the day. I'm once again stuck at home because of COVID. You just can't get rid of it. So
you got COVID.
My wife's got COVID. I'm pretty sure I got COVID. Everybody's got COVID, man. It's COVID season again. It's fall season, pumpkin season. So I'm just trying to find the positive. So got my latte in me. We're gonna talk some Spurs. So I'm pretty happy about it. So we'll find some bright spots here.
As long as you're happy about it, that's the most important thing. You're finding the positives. That's a good attitude to have anyway. Yeah, so let's get into the Spurs. Obviously, like I was saying, they've kind of been forgotten about. They were the talk of the town for a little while in the NBA when they drafted when they got that number 1 pick in the lottery, drafted Victor Wembanyama. They've committed to the first piece. They gave Devin Vassell a 5-year, $146 million contract. What do you think about that? It kind of came out of left field, but it feels like a smart move for them.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm excited we have something to talk about with the Spurs. I was mentioning to you before we got on the air that I don't think we've done like a focused Spurs episode, like really ever, maybe. And this time we're not even going to be talking about Wemby, but somehow you've still managed to say Wemby like 5 times. So you've failed us there. But I mean, my first thought when you look at it, without really thinking about the salary cap, without thinking about the context, you're like, whoa, that's a big contract. It's a big commitment, long year commitment. That's a big number. But I think once we peel back the layers to who he is as a player and what the current market is and what really that means in terms of the new deals that are going on, because we have to remember like the TV deal, like the contracts that are going out right now are crazy. So relatively speaking, I think this will be pretty fair. So I don't know where you want to start with Vassell, but I think we should talk about him as a player and, think about, for people who haven't maybe seen him, how prolific he's become in his 3rd year. This guy's just 23 years old out of Florida State. And if we remember him, this is a guy that was just going to be kind of a 3-and-D player, is more of like a role player type of guy, the kind of guy you draft late in the lottery because he'll be a good NBA player, but you don't really expect too much. So let's look back at last season and see what he did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he had that was his kind of a breakout year. The disappointing part was obviously that it was cut short. Only played in 38 games, but he started 32 of them. Obviously, that was kind of a significant jump from previous years where he'd basically been coming off the bench. But he's the guy he's improved year on year when he's been in the league. Obviously, year 1, only 5.5 points per game. Then year 2 goes up to 12.3 points per game. Then last year, he was at 18.5. And his 3-point shooting has gone up with the percentage has risen with the more attempts that he's gotten, how comfortable he's gotten in the league. Last year was looking like a really big year for him. It's obviously tough to really gauge it because he only did it across 38 games, but the 18.5 points, shooting 39% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. and just the overall growth in his game and a bit more understanding. You even got a few examples of the handle that he's got, his ability to create in the mid range and things like that. It was an important year. It was just disappointing that it got cut short due to injury.
Yeah, and that's, when we're looking at a player like him, that was definitely one of the main concerns. It's just like if the knee's a problem, but I think, given what kind of surgery he had, it was nothing major. It was kind of a cleanup type of thing. And honestly, a perfect time to do it for the team to really get themselves ahead. And that's why they're sitting here with Wemby. But I think when you mentioned the 3-point shooting, that seems to kind of like fall in line with what, people expect from him. It's like, oh, okay, he's a 3-and-D guy. Look at that 3-point shooting. He's 6'6", 6'7" in shoes with a 6'10" wingspan, really mucks it up on defense. Great switchable guy. Like that's such a typical guy. But then when you like watch his games, I think the most surprising thing, because I'll be honest, I was not turning on a whole lot of Spurs last year. That I got to come clean. So I had plenty of homework to do to catch up on what he's been doing. And his offensive game is impressive. Like you can tell there's still a little bit of rawness there. And I think from a production standpoint, the fact that he's still polishing off his dribble drive moves. He's got this great in and out move. He's really good, honestly, in the pick and roll, the way he can snake the pick and roll, the way he can get to his shooting hand and fade to the right. Like his mid-range game is surprising. If you look at his numbers, first of all, even in pick and roll actions, pick and pop actions, he was shooting 50.6% off of picks, 158. So that's a pretty big sample size. And he shot over 50% of those. On pull-up mid-rangers, he's shooting 45%. And like that's not a number necessarily like that maybe if you just throw that number out there, that's immediately amazing. But for reference, DeMar DeRozan, 47% shooting. And then Kevin Durant, the king of mid-range, 56%. But Devin Booker shot around that same range, obviously a little bit more. So I think that looking at him as a 3-and-D player is selling him so short of the kind of player he can become, because he's shown a lot of ability to create in the mid-range. He's shown a lot of ability to shoot from three, and not just like wide open, just catch and shoot, sit in the corner. Like he's able to be a movement shooter, come off a lot of different actions. And I think that, when you look at this number, like around, I think the highest number is going to be 29 million this year, and it kind of descends every year as it goes with some incentives. Like if he hits free agency next year as a 23-year-old going on 24-year-old, 20-point per game scorer, 2-level, maybe 3-level. One thing he needs to grow on is his scoring inside, but creating defensive. Like how many guys are you looking at that has elite defensive upside at 24 years old, can shoot off the dribble, can play make and shoot threes? That list is not very long. And I think when you think about it that way and his age, I think this deal makes a lot of sense. So that's my long-winded way of saying, I think I was a little bit shocked, but now I totally get it. This may be even a bargain deal depending on how much he develops from here.
Yeah, that's the thing. Obviously, you look at it and you say on the one hand, you're like, oh, this could really turn out to be a genius move from the Spurs, and they could really get a lot out of this guy over the next 5 years. And then the other hand, you're kind of like, oh, the injuries may be a little bit of a worry. Will his game really develop? Will he be a great piece alongside Wembanyama? And I think in terms of what he offers, I think he should be a great starting point for playing with for playing with Wembanyama. The way he can hit from deep, the way he can create his own shot inside. And I think actually it was funny because last year he actually ended up being a negative defender when originally, obviously coming into the league, his calling card was like a 3-point shooter, good defender, but because I think he knew that everyone within the Spurs organization knew they wanted to tank, they wanted to get Wembanyama. So I think he kind of used that as a chance to really show what he could do as an offensive player, and it worked. Obviously, he was only over 38 games, but it worked for him because he's after getting paid a nice bag, and I don't think that defensive deficiencies will continue. I think he'll become a much better defender. Now that they're going to get a system in place, you'd think the system is going to be built around probably Wembanyama and Sochan as the two main defensive pieces, and then a guy like like Vassell can have a big impact there. And I think you're thinking about him and Keldon Johnson. Like Keldon Johnson averaged 22 points per game last year. They're going to be like the two guys looking to add that major scoring punch outside of Wembanyama then. And I think if they got them both on pretty friendly deals right now, it's just smart business from the Spurs. And if it actually comes off and especially Vassell, if he's a guy that really develops into an efficient 20-point per game scorer that can also be a plus on the defensive end, that's an unbelievable deal to get over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I love bringing up Wemby in this situation for Vassell and for Johnson for that matter, because I think the questions we do have a little bit are defensively, like you said, which is, it is ironic because you think of, okay, a 3D player. And I think on the perimeter, I mean, he's a fantastic defender. I think off ball, he's a little bit better because he really takes a lot of gambles getting in passing lanes. He's got really long arms and he really stays low to the floor. So he's always in position to strip balls from the post. He's always in position to attack the passing lanes. And both him and Sohan, I think they really create a lot of opportunities. And it surprised me, when you look at those guys like that, it makes more sense why they have so much pace. But they were first in pace last year. The Spurs organization being first in pace, that can't have happened ever in Pop's time with the Spurs. I can't imagine that. But I think that they're going to have a lot easier time, with some of their defensive deficiencies when you have Wemby back there. Zach Collins, who knows if he is going to stick here, but he had a nice little stint at the end of last season, just looking at his numbers and looking at how, the team's viewing him. And I think you have Sohan there too. So what needs to happen though, I think for both him and Keldon Johnson, just kind of lumping them together, is that mentality, that the losing, not that they had a losing mentality, but you get away with, being a negative defender because everyone's a negative defender. Like, they were 30th defensive rating as a team, the worst team in the league on defense. So how much better can they get with the young guys? Got another year of experience with Wembanyama back there, who should be a top 3 shot blocker in the league, with Sohan, who they want him to be kind of almost like a Ben Simmons-esque kind of defender on the wing against point guards and whoever. Can everyone else catch up? Because that's going to be, I think, when we're talking about the Spurs today, we're talking about guys like Vassell. That's an interesting point to me, because not every facet of a team and a player is going to get better in just 1 year. But if defensively that can turn around, that would give me a little bit more faith in some of the lofty expectations of a team with Wemby, because I think some people have pretty big hopes for this rookie campaign, but I'm not sure it'll go much further if the defense doesn't turn around as a team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think obviously you have to have the expectations, and we're all right to have those expectations, the potential that Wembanyama has, but you also look at it and you say, you could make the argument that next season is more important to see the all-round growth from a guy like Sohan, the defensive development from Keldon Johnson and from Vassell to stay healthy and get up to being that efficient 20-point per game scorer. If all that comes together and Wemby just has a pretty normal rookie year, like he's averaging like 18 and 10 maybe and like a block and a half or something like that, like that I think would almost give you a little bit more belief. Obviously you want to have Wembanyama having the greatest rookie year of all time, but I think that side of it, I think from a Spurs organization point of view, maybe not from the fan base point of view, but from the organization point of view, if you get that, I think it's almost a bigger plus than just seeing Wembanyama instantly take off and get them like close to the play-in or something.
Yeah. I think ultimately finishing on Vassell, what he should be able to do for this team next year is to be that main guy, not Wembanyama. Mm-hmm. I think Trey Jones, maybe we'll talk about him a little bit. Like he's a great floor general, is a great table setter, but not really a great scorer. And if Vassell continues to become a good facilitator, if he has all-star potential, he can do it alongside Wembanyama. And if he's a guy that you put the ball in his hands, he has the look of the type of player that you can do that with, because when you have a guy who can score off the dribble like that, I mean, you see with guys like Devin Booker, you see with guys like DeMar DeRozan, when you're able to create out of screening actions, you're able to create off a pick and roll, you're able to create on your own off the dribble, like that opens things up for other teammates. And I think he has really great passing potential. So I don't think this is necessarily, from the Spurs organization's point of view. So I think they're going to taking it really slow with Wemby, which is the smart thing to do. I think this is the year for Vassell pop, and that would look really nice for this organization to be giving him that big contract and for him to really come up big. And that's kind of in contrast with the guy who had another breakout year, which is Johnson, who kind of delivered after he got that extension. Where do you think Keldon Johnson's place is on this team now? With, we just talked about Vassell and, Sohan, he's probably going to be favored to be on the court at the same time as Wemby to kind of support him defensively. So where do you think he ends up in this lineup?
Yeah, it's tough to make a call on those two. Like, can you definitely say for sure that both Vassell and Johnson can thrive playing this team together with Wemby there as well? It's a tough call to make. It's kind of one you're going to have to wait and see on a little bit. Obviously, they both got different talents. I think Vassell you can make the argument that he's got more potential as a 3-level scorer, I think, than maybe Keldon Johnson, and maybe the implementing Wembanyama and maybe the pace dropping a little bit. I think that might hurt Johnson a little bit more than it will Vassell. But I think if he's got the talent that I think the Spurs believe he's got, he'll be able to adapt his game and still be a pretty prolific scorer on this team, because it's not like Vassell's instantly going to take off and just be that lead scorer for this team. Like, Keldon Johnson will still have a big part to play in this Spurs offense. Whether that's playing a bit more with the bench unit, I think that maybe remains to be seen. But I think it's probably a bit more likely you see him play a bit more consistently with the bench unit, being the lead guy there. But I think he could also be a starter and can still contribute in this lineup.
Yeah, I think he's got the best shot to keep his numbers up if he's playing a little bit more with the bench unit. I think one thing that he has the greatest skill out of anybody on this team is putting pressure on the rim. That's something that Devin Vassell hasn't really been able to do. And you look up and down the lineup, and no one's really going to be putting the pressure on the rim like he can. And we'll see at an NBA level how Wembanyama is going to put pressure on the rim by himself. But it seems like a lot of his offense is going to come a little bit more from the mid range and from three. Not just like getting inside. So I would wonder, how much his shooting is going to hold back this team, though.
Yeah.
Because Trey Jones and Keldon Johnson on the floor at the same time is going to be tough. That combination is a little tough in terms of keeping, the kind of passing that the Spurs want to do. Moving the ball around that only works if teams have to rotate to that guy. No one's stressing getting out to Trey Jones. No one's stressing getting out to Keldon Johnson. Vassell and Wemby, maybe. I think Wemby, just as a name, like, everyone knows who he is. Like, people are going to close out on Wemby, and plus he's so tall, like, you have to get there early. But even his shooting is pretty raw. Like, people just see highlights of him shooting and don't realize that he's probably going to shoot like 33% from three this year. Mm-hmm. At best, maybe he's like a 35%. He's not going to be an elite 3-point shooter this year. So that's one thing that I think will hold Johnson back, is just getting a guy like and maybe Branham at the 2, who's another young guy. So just looking up and down it, we're naming so many young players who have to take a step forward and are not there yet in reality where they need to be for them to be competitive. Like, just with all these variables in place, like, how good do we think this team can be? Maybe it's an early question to ask before you've even like looked at the whole final depth chart, but it doesn't feel like a given at all.
No, I think there's a very good chance this Spurs team is one of the bottom 2 teams in the Western Conference this year. I don't think it's crazy to think that might happen. I know it's kind of hard to hear, and it seems crazy because we're going so mad about this guy Wembanyama that they're after drafting, but this is still a very young, raw team. Wembanyama is still coming over here from Europe. There's still going to be a lot of growing pains within this Spurs team. I think at best, if Wembanyama goes and has a historic rookie year, you get that growth out of Vassell. You don't see as much problems on the defensive end. Then maybe you could make the argument that they could make a push towards the play-in, but I think it's more likely that they're a bottom 2 seed in the West and they make the play-in. I'd say that.
Yeah, I agree. But before we like maybe play them where they're at, I am still excited to just like think about these guys, because I mean, a guy like Branham, Malachi Branham, wasn't a huge household name in the draft. I want to say he was drafted in the early 20s, but he's a guy that definitely fits this roster with his versatility, his passing, shooting, like guys like that. I mean, what we saw from Champagny and the summer league. I know it's just summer league, but just what he showed continuing from last season, just being a two-way player and being able to shoot the lights out. So there's guys on the team that I think fit at least. I think at the very least that this team has enough players to complement Wembanyama in a way that it'll be like a competitive and functional year. And maybe at its very best, like what's their best case scenario? Like what's the story look like? Who's the heroes at the end of the day if they are the 10th seed? Because I mean, being that means they're better than they need to be better than the Rockets. Sure, I maybe, yeah, better than Trailblazers. Absolutely, I could see that for sure. Better than Jazz, maybe. Better than the Mavs. That would be pretty sad. Better than the Thunder, that would be pretty insane. Better than the Pelicans. So something crazy has got to go right. Who is popping on this team? Like what went right if they're making the plan?
Wembanyama's had one of maybe the best rookie year since Michael Jordan, I would have to say. I think that's if they're getting at that level and they're ahead of some of those teams like you just mentioned. I think Wembanyama's had the best rookie year since MJ. Vassell's really popped off. Maybe Johnson's shot has held up a little bit more, and Sochan's taken that step on the defensive end. I think that will all have to happen in order for them to be the 10th seed in the Western Conference. And improving Western Conference as well. The Western Conference is always getting better on top of just the fact that this is a young raw team.
Yeah, you gotta hit on all those. But I think that's a tough part for teams like this. It's when you have to ask that many questions for that many young guys. It's just obvious, like, you know, they're not there yet. The hype is absolutely there, and I think it'll be an exciting year to grow. But are there any players on this team that maybe you're excited to, anyone that we haven't mentioned, excited to see if they stick here, or maybe if they're going to be a contributor in a way that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I think obviously Trey Jones is the kind of the interesting one. Like,
yeah,
he showed nice growth last year. Obviously, he got up to 12.3 points per game and 6.6 assists, but that weakness from shooting the three is going to be a problem. I think he's going to really have to boost up the assist numbers to really show that he's worth kind of betting on and keeping around with this team, because I think they'd be looking at that position, the point guard position, as a position they need to target moving forward and look for someone that I think can provide at least the same level of playmaking he can, but also be an efficient 3-point shooter, because I think those are two really important qualities in a modern day point guard in the NBA, and something that they kind of I wouldn't say desperately need, but definitely something they have to be looking at, because on the whole, shooting the three, this team isn't very good, and in terms of what they've got at the moment, the potential doesn't look amazing for that to really improve in any sort of drastic way. Yeah,
I mean, Trey Jones is a last of a dying breed, like a pure point guard, much like his brother, Tyus Jones, and it's kind of a lazy comparison, obviously, but he, along with his brother, one of the best point guards in the league when it comes to assist to turnover ratio, 6-1. Like that's an insane assist to turnover ratio, especially for a young guy, especially in a system that is often so messy, with all of them being inexperienced, really. I was thinking about him as well, because I'm really excited to see guys like Wemby, guys like Keldon Johnson, guys like Vassell, guys like Sochan. They need a true playmaker, and he is. I mean, if you look around the league, who's a true playmaker that's going to be unselfish and not really, take away from other guys? Because these guys need to, like we talked about, they need to grow, they need to be fed the ball, and you got him on your team. Like you got a Tyus Jones 2.0 on your team, and Trey just literally just needs to hit the three, in order for that to come along. And you'd have to imagine that is probably the main thing he's working on over the offseason,
I hope
because
so, yeah.
the playmaking is there. I mean, he's one of the better finishers as using a floater, using the runner. So I mean, size isn't a massive issue for him because he's been creative at scoring at the rim. I mean, defensively too, he's a really tenacious, even though he's a little bit on the smaller side, he's a tenacious defender. Like, he's just checks off all the boxes for the kind of guy that you want alongside a star power forward center. So he hopefully he sticks around. Yeah, who do you think could be the first All-Star out of this group? Wemby's the easy answer. But
it probably is Wemby, but I think you got to really look at Vassell, and if what they've invested in and what it appears could come from him, he could get to that level of being a 20-point per game scorer. We saw a little bit boost in terms of his assist game. Obviously, that's never really been part of his game, but if he can bump that up a little bit more and become a guy that can deliver like 4 or 4.5 assists a game outside of the scoring, because that's an important part to add to his game. Obviously, when he has more talent around him, it's not always going to be about him getting his shot, and he can add that bit more playmaking too. Then the need for a legit point guard might cease, and you'll see more from Jones then. So I think that side of it, I think if he really comes true, I think he's the likely one ahead of like the likes of Keldon Johnson, and I don't think Sochan's not really. Maybe if he really gets going as a defender, but I don't think he's ever that kind of mold of a legit all-star, you know?
Yeah, I think that Sochan will be. I think he could be a defensive player of the year, top 3 voting type of guy within the next 2-3 years. Maybe not this year, but he just looking at the tape on the kind of things he does, it's freakish. And if no one's watched it, it's like the way he can defend small guys, and sometimes he does get beat off the dribble, just like being a little bit out of position. But the way he can recover and time his jumps, I think that's one thing too. Just talking little things about some of these guys that. So again, this is our first time really going through some the tape on these guys, and it's fun to do. But the way he jumps, man, he is able to time his jumps perfectly against big guys, against smaller players, and they're always unexpected. It's a lot of the blocks he gets, he's not really in a super great position, and it's like he lost track of the guy. There's even a play on Julius Randle where it's a one-on-one in the break, and Randle just completely overpowered. Like once Randle like hits you in the chest on that Euro, like you're gone. You thought he was going to be out of the play. He gets bumped and like twists and is right there where Randle's going to step. It's that IQ that he had, that as he's getting bumped out of the way, he just pivots and he's right at the apex of Julius Randle's jump. And that's just sheer talent. And when you see plays like that, like sheer defensive talent, it's like at that age, at his level of inexperience, like he's only going to get better from there. So
look how quickly Evan Mobley's kind of made that leap up to being a top level defender. Like Sochan can definitely do it just as quick.
Yeah. I think bottom line, like these guys have a lot more talent than I think they had been given credit for. And the talk has been mostly just on Wembanyama and how good is he going to be in the NBA. And I think more is to be talked about how much untapped potential there is on this team, because they just had so many young guys trying to figure things out all at once under Popovich. And I don't think there's a ton of situations that we've seen recently where teams like that have stick together. And I think we kind of alluded to that when we talk about the Rockets. Like, you have so much talent. How can it figure itself out? And who better to lead the program like that? I think one of the greatest coaches of all time, if not the greatest. So Greg Popovich has, been silently working this team towards a moment like this when they have what could be one of the best players in the NBA in the very near future. And I think that, they're not necessarily at like square one, like you usually have when you're drafting a number one guy. Yeah. A lot of teams, it's like, all right, now we got to build towards that. I think they're a lot closer to having a real team around Wemby than I originally thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And just the final point, obviously, we introduced this segment talking about the Vassell contract, and just to put it into the context, despite this contract, they're still able to offer a max contract next summer if they choose to be aggressive in that sort of way. And I think also when he gets to either year 4 or year 5, his contract will only account for like 15.6% of the cap, which is just kind of crazy. Like this is a smart move from them, and if he delivers on it, it's not going to hold them back in any way. And even like obviously it'll hurt if he doesn't really deliver to the extent that they want him to, but it's a very team friendly deal they've got him on, and it's a nice extension for a guy that really could pop this year.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We flip it over to the other end of the NBA, the top side, the super teams, the Boston Celtics, the Phoenix Suns, and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, let's start. We want to start with the Celtics. We were able to kind of think about where we wanted Jrue Holiday to go, but here he is. He's in Boston, and I'm a little bit shocked with it. Now that I've had a few days to process, what it meant. And I want to hear what your thoughts are. Like, where did they truly get on a whole? Thinking about balance, and just not even position, but like the balance from this team and how good they want to be to compete for a championship. Did this push the needle? Move the needle? Push the needle?
Yeah, the needle moves. The needle edged a little bit. Yeah, I think they kind of came around full circle, and obviously they had to give up important pieces when you think of Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon as important role players for them, but after giving up Marcus Smart, they arguably went and got an upgrade on Marcus Smart to finish out the roster after giving him up earlier in the summer to get Kristaps Porzingis in. So that's an interesting side of it. I think an important thing that I saw with Holiday, actually, he shot, I think, 45% on catch and shoot threes last year, which is obviously an important mark, and that's something I didn't really know. I definitely didn't notice. Obviously, he always is someone that you think of struggling with his shot, and I think the defense and the playmaking that he provides, that's huge for this Boston team. And you look at them again now, and you really think that in terms of a team defense, they're in position to have a really elite team defense.
Yeah, defensively speaking, I think that they stay the same, but they risk getting worse. That's my concern. I think Jrue Holiday and Marcus Smart, take your pick. I mean, those are name better point of attack defensive guards, except not named Alex Caruso. That you're going to have a tough time finding him. Those are pretty even matchups when you're considering, hey, who do we want to defend? A guy like, I don't know, Damian Lillard. There you go. But giving up Robert Williams worries me a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only point of it. I think on the whole, like, just we can get past the point where they did get a guy like Jrue Holiday, even though I won't bring up the fact that he was 11th, and I want to say he was 11th in turnover percentage for guys who took as many shots as he did. And if you take a listen to fantasy owners of Jrue Holiday, they'll tell you how much he turns the ball over. And Marcus Smart actually turned the ball over less of the time. So turnover percentage by itself is an interesting metric of like who is a more responsible ball carrier. I don't know. You'd think by reputation and by assist numbers that Jrue Holiday would be, but it seems like that wasn't super different there. So I'm pressed to immediately say that you solved the issue of turnovers that you got from Marcus Smart, but I will say that the catch and shoot is more important. So him being a better shooter. But where I was going with this is more the front court.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with Giannis. You're dealing with Embiid. I mean, that's the main competition you're thinking about when you're getting to the finals. Is don't forget that, 76ers were right there. Who knows? I mean, James Harden just practiced with Embiid. Did they make up? Is he just going to give it up? I don't know. But they were right there. They were real close to being the ones in the finals, not Celtics. And Robert Williams being healthy is always a question mark for sure after these surgeries he's had. But so is Al Horford, and being a little bit older. Was he now 37, going on 38?
Mm-hmm.
And Kristaps Porzingis, I'm really happy he had a healthy year last year, but you can't deny the fact that he is a walking, he's just at risk to be injured at any point in time. So putting your faith in two guys like that is a little tough. Putting your faith in three of them, that's great. Like, one of them is probably gonna be injured. You at least you have the other two, and you have a really good chance at stopping a guy like Giannis, stopping a guy like Embiid. So I don't know how bad does this season go if one of them gets injured, or if they're not fully 100%, their front court's not fully ready, in the playoffs health wise. That's my only concern, because with the Celtics, I mean, you're going to be contenders either way.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, you can kind of look at all these teams, Suns, Celtics, and Bucks, and say there's that question of health there kind of roams around all of them. Maybe the Celtics are the most obvious one. When you think of Porzingis, is just like that's kind of his whole mantra of being this guy who's always injured. But Giannis has had a few injury troubles. Obviously, he had them last year in the playoffs in the first round. Dame has had those sort of troubles. Lopez has had his injury worries. Then you look at Durant, obviously, Beal as well. So I mean, like that. Obviously, you say health is always it's always a switch that could happen at any time. But I think all three of these teams, you can definitely make the argument that they're all kind of banking on something that hasn't really been over the last 3 years, and that's that all these guys are able to stay healthy for a regular season and then a playoff run. So that side of it, you kind of don't worry too much. But I think at the same time, I do take your point that I'd say the Celtics are probably the most likely team to kind of suffer from that trouble. But I think outside of them, when you think of Brown and Tatum, they're two steady guys that you believe are going to be on the court. Jrue Holiday is the same thing.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really important point for them, that arguably their best players are still going to be on the floor for them. So it shouldn't derail them too much. But obviously, when you get to the playoffs, that's the big key. Like Porzingis, Horford, and they've got to be at 100%, or else that they're not going to be able to stop Giannis and the Bucks.
Yeah, that's a good point. That kind of brings up, like, if I'm arguing with that point in my head, Holiday is going to play way more games than Malcolm Brogdon is over a 1-2 year span. And he's going to be way more. Same thing with Rob Williams. So even though you're switching position there, like, he's going to be healthier than both of them, I would predict. But yeah, that's just a small little risk, because I liked the idea of that three big man depth there for the Celtics, and I like the idea of that going up against Giannis, and I had faith in Derek White and Jaylen Brown being able to put up enough defense, and Malcolm Brogdon is serviceable there too. But I mean, certainly when you get Jrue Holiday, you got back that level of defender that you had with Marcus Smart, and then pairing that with Derek White. I mean, that's gonna be really tough for Dame. Dame's not going to have an easy time, scoring against that. So they have a chance, if they're going against the Bucks, there is that one-on-one defender that you can put on Dame that you'd be pretty happy with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then, like, in terms of the teams as a whole, like I wrote a piece on this the other day, giving my thoughts on it. I think the Bucks have got the best starting five out of the three teams. I think, look at the Bucks, have got Lillard, Connaughton, Middleton, Giannis, Lopez. Obviously, then the Celtics got Holiday, Brown, Tatum, KP, Horford, and then the Suns got Booker, maybe, it's tough to know, maybe Grayson Allen, Bradley Beal, Durant, Nurkic. I think you're looking at that as in terms of the starting five, when the likely that's their best team. You think the Bucks have definitely got a step up there, and even just in terms of the way that their two superstars complement each other. You think they excel where the other one kind of struggles a bit. So you'd say they're probably. Well, I'd say the Bucks. Would you agree that the Bucks got the best?
I would, and I think it's what we talked about last week is the balance. I think the way that their skills synergize each other make a little bit more sense than what you see with the Suns. I would also say the same thing about the Celtics, though. Mm-hmm. I think the Celtics, especially with their 3-point shooting. I mean, that's now with Kristaps, like that is one thing too, that Bucks Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, that's going to be I expect that that's going to be one of the best series that we've seen in a while. Just the amount of 3-point shooting the Celtics can have, and the dynamics between Lillard and Giannis and Chris Middleton, just having the pressure off of him a bit to get back to his form, being a playmaker as well, and maybe he gets a little bit more time in the second unit. I just think that there's more balance in terms of what each of these players bring to the table compared to Phoenix. But then I'm not going to deny that the sheer firepower that Phoenix brings when it comes to their shot creators. Like that's something that none of these teams can boast, except for maybe the Celtics. I mean, it's tough. I want to say the Bucks just because of Dame and Giannis, but I think the Celtics are half
close.
step behind.
Yeah, it's definitely close. And you think like then you look at the Sun, you're like you can make the argument that they have 3 of the top maybe 12 scorers in the league on their team. You could make that argument. I know Beal's kind of been a bit of an afterthought over the last couple of years, but before that he was a 30-point per game scorer. And you think of Durant then and Booker as well, they're definitely around that mark. And then in terms of depth as a whole, then you look at the teams and you're thinking the Suns are kind of a bit way out there in terms of the depth that they have compared to both the Celtics and the Bucks. Obviously, not most of them don't really have any big depth. Obviously, you got Ball, and then you're kind of like Eubanks, and then a couple of other nobodies for the Suns, and then the Celtics have got their brother Wenyen Gable. They got Cornette. I guess you show Stevens into that category maybe, and then the Bucks have got Robin Lopez and Bobby Portis. Obviously, Bobby Portis is a legit sixth man of the year. Yeah.
I was going to say, do not disrespect Bobby Portis for a second.
No, I wasn't gonna do that. But then in terms of like the wings and guards, the Suns really got a lot more options than definitely than the Celtics. The Bucks have got they've made some nice additions in terms of like Beasley, and I think Campaign was a nice pickup from them. They still got Jay Crowder. Beauchamp was a guy that Damian Lillard's been talking about over the last few days, saying that he's impressed him. Maybe he can play a bit more of a role. But then the Celtics have got White, Pritchard, and Hauser. Can Pritchard really get back to that sort of level that he showed? Probably not. White's obviously a really solid player. We're going to get from him. But then the Suns got Gordon. They got Johnson. They got Little, Kogi, Watanabe. There's just that more options there. And even just for freshness and health-wise going through the regular season, I think that could stand the Suns in a good stead going into the playoffs with just more options there.
Yeah, I mean, comparing all of them, the Suns. We talked about the Suns and their depth, and I think what the Suns have is a ton of options, and you're not sure which ones are going to stick. Is it going to be your Nasir Little, Keita Bates, Diop? I really don't think Bol is going to. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, they kind of need him to in terms of Nurkic is a cripple again.
Yeah, I mean, sure thing. I think Eric Gordon's a sure thing. I think Grayson Allen's a sure thing. You know exactly what you're going to get from them, and they are going to be consistent. You're not too worried about it. And I think also Yuta, and I think the Kogi, like what they do is for sure. But then when you look at the Celtics, like I Pritchard maybe. I mean, he has the option to be the third guard now, and he's wanted more time. I actually looking past that, I really do like Delano Banton. I like him a lot, especially when you have the wings that the all-star, all-NBA wings that you have. You can have Jaylen Brown, have the ball in his hands. You can have Jason Tatum have the ball in his hands. You just have a lot of playmakers on this team, and you don't necessarily need your point guard to be a playmaker all the time. Banton's a guy that is a beast defensively. He's big. He's basically a wing who can handle the ball. We'll see what else you can get out of him, but they have options there. I mean, when you and Gabriel, we're not going to go that deep there, but I guess it's a similar issue. Sam Hauser is one though. Since you mentioned him, he just completely disappeared from the rotation at the end, and he was one of the best 3-point shooters. I mean, if I'm going to give a guy like Yuta Watanabe a shout out, even though I think he got more run, albeit it's the Nets, he could do whatever he wants because he earned it there, but. Sam Hauser, I mean, he showed that he's solid defensively and is absolutely a lights out shooter. So, I mean, why not? Lamar Stevens, I love that pickup too. I mean, that's a guy who's he's always going to be a great rebounder, great defender. I mean, these guys, I think they filled, all things considered, they filled their teams with guys who what you're going to get out of them. you know what you're going to get out of some of these players. And I think when you look at the Bucks, though, I think the Bucks they don't have a lot of those kind of I don't know who's going to pop, because Marjon Beauchamp is kind of that only guy that, you know, maybe he emerges into the rotation. He's a guy that can bolster the depth. And you know, if Tame is saying it, maybe that's there something. I've also heard DeMar DeRozan hyping up Pat Williams for the past 2 years, and that's not really worked out for me. So I'm not going to go off of a star saying someone else is doing well until I see it myself. But Beauchamp, you know, maybe that's there. I like that they still have Jay Crowder in the locker room. You seem to like that they got Campaign. I'm not sure why.
I think in terms of what the options that they have, I think that's a pretty damn good pickup to
sure
what they could have got and what they've got. I think that's a pretty decent pickup.
Fair. I was gonna say that was my, when we're just talking about depth and like what's like the biggest point of weakness. Like I think for the Bucks, I'm not worried about their wing rotation really. I like having Malik Beasley there. You can bother, you know, having a chucker when you have the kind of players you have on this team. But the point guard rotation, that is interesting. Campaign is your only other guy. He's had his moments, but it's like, I don't know. It would be nice to have kept Javon Carter if possible. So
yeah, okay, that's fair. I think that's fair. I think Campaign can deliver something for this team, and I just think for the nobody, or they could have put that down to a rookie in terms of the position they ended up being when they made the trade for Dame. I think to get a guy like Campaign who's been a solid bench scorer on playoff teams, I think it's a smart pickup from.
Yeah, I do like having a guy like, I mean, he can get hot for sure. He can get hot from three, and on the Bucks you need that. So I mean, you got a guy like Payne, you got a guy like Malik Beasley. I mean, guys that can get hot in a minute and just start raining threes. You have a couple guys like that, and that definitely helps out. Who knows? Maybe this is the Marjon Beauchamp season.
Yeah, you never know. He could be the next. He'll be the
next Chris Middleton. You don't even need Chris Middleton after that if he shows up.
Yeah, maybe not. Okay, I'll put it to you this way then. Which of these three teams do you think will have the best regular season? Forgetting the playoffs, just in terms of regular season, in terms of the depth and in terms of their main guys staying healthy.
Celtics going to be the 1 seed. Celtics going to be a 1 seed. Yeah, for sure. Jason Tatum is going to have another MVP season. I have a feeling the Bucks will be a little bit more cautious with their players and rest a little bit more as much as they can.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think the Celtics, I think I'd be with you there as well. I think Tatum, maybe it won't come this year, but I believe that Jason Tatum is going to be a future MVP of this league, and I think he's going to take another step this year in terms of his two-way play and overall performance. And I think they'll be able to cover up a little bit as well with some of the rest. Maybe some of the guys like Horford and Porzingis have to take as well. But we finish off with a top 5 list. Top 5 teams to break the playoff hoodoo. I only did teams that have been gone for at least 3 seasons, so 7 teams qualify here.
Okay.
At number 5, got the Detroit Pistons. They've been out of the playoffs for 4 years. They've got a pretty decent lineup. Obviously, still a very raw group, but I think if K comes back healthy now when he's leading that group from the point position, I think there is a chance that they get into the play-in in the Eastern Conference, because it's you can make the argument that it's kind of open a bit more in the Eastern Conference than it is out west. At 4, I've got the Orlando Magic. I know a team that you really like. They've been out of the playoffs for 3 years. Franz Wagner had a great year. Paolo Banchero going into a sophomore year. They've got a couple of young guys that should really be looking to make a splash this year. And I think that all things coming together, they could definitely be a team that's surprising the Eastern Conference. Number 3, the Houston Rockets. Obviously, they really went in this offseason, got in a lot of vets. They're still hoping for growth from guys like Jalen Green. They've got a couple of rookies coming in as well. How can Sengun do? How does Brooks and Van Vliet impact here? If all things come together. At number 2, I've got the Oklahoma City Thunder.
How many? Hold on, before you go to number 2, what? How many years has it been for Houston? I'm trying to remember.
2020 was their last year.
2020.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it feels like a lot longer than that. But
It does. At number 2, the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that have also been out for 3 years. I wanted to have these at number 1, but just the fact that Chet Holmgren is coming in as a rookie, and I think there's still a bit of rawness to that team, and just in terms of the Western Conference improving once again, it's still gonna be tough for them to definitely say they're going to get back to the playoffs this year. Although I still expect great things from Shea, and I think Chet will really challenge Wembanyama for Rookie of the Year. Oh, yeah. And then at number 1, my boys, the Indiana Pacers. They've been out for 3 years. They've made some really nice additions across this offseason. I'm hearing good things like that I really want to hear about Mathurin. Obviously, have to wait and see how it works out. But the additions of Obi Toppin, the addition of Bruce Brown, Hield is probably still going to be there. He still seems to be happy to play in Indiana if no trade comes from that. I think they've got that bit more depth, and I think they're ready to really even challenge for a top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference this year.
I was really racking my brain. I'm like, who is ahead of the Thunder? But yeah, Thunder and Pacers. I love both those teams getting back in it, because I think they'll be teams that are like competitive if they make it out of the play-in. But absolutely, it can be competitive. I
had the Pacers above the Thunder because I just think the East is a little bit easier to break into than the West.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. The Pistons, they're a tough one. I think we gotta see what we get out of Cade this year in terms of his shooting, in terms of scoring, because he's the tide that raises all boats, right? Like in terms of play, we know what we're going to get for the playmaking. We've seen the flashes of, his defensive versatility, but I am really curious to see how he does, because I think people are forgetting about Cade, because, Wemby, huge phenomenon, right? Like Cade in his own right, I think he was rightfully so really touted, like massive expectations for him, and then gets injured, and all it takes is a year of being injured. Yeah. And Wembanyama getting drafted, and like nobody cares about you. Like Cade Cunningham is going to be a household name, and he's going to have his moment. And if we all talk about Banchero, how great he is, and the cool things he did in Team USA, like Cade Cunningham is going to be a big player, and we'll see it this year. Playoffs, that'll be tough. That's a most improved type of season if Cade Cunningham is leading in the playoffs. But yeah, I like that. That's a good list.
Yeah. I'm happy the teams that missed out were the Spurs and the Hornets, which I think is I think is fair. It's definitely realistic. I think for sure. Obviously, I'd say even if I included the teams that have only been out for 2 years, I think that only brings in the Trailblazers and the Jazz. So even at that, I don't even know if I would have included those two on the list anyway. So to think like even to broaden the horizons a little bit, I think that's a pretty accurate list. You'd agree with that? You think that's fair?
We don't agree on much, Ronan, but I'll agree with that. That's fine.
That's good to hear. Hopefully the Pacers show up, and maybe the OKC Thunder too. But I think I was happy with that one. Nice little way to finish off. But as always, great to talk some ball. Really excited to talk about the Spurs. It's actually got me kind of pumped to watch them this year. I'll even be looking out for them in the preseason. Obviously, that's coming up now. We had the first preseason game today out in Abu Dhabi. The Timberwolves took down the Mavericks. Got a couple more games, I think, coming Saturday, and then to be a nice flow leading up to the start of the NBA season. But we're finally getting out of the doldrums. We're actually getting in towards preseason and really getting back into NBA basketball. There's going to be so much more to talk about it. Myself and Chris will be here to cover it all. You just make sure to follow, subscribe, comment, check us out wherever you get your podcasts. We are everywhere at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.